Hello horror hounds, and welcome to the last entry in my A to Z of horror. So now the end of my A to Z of horror is near, and though I face the final curtain of my A to Z of horror, we're going to look at a 1979 Italian zombie movie, one of the greats. It goes by many titles: Zombie, Zombie 2, but I'm from the UK, son. Round these parts, Z is for zombie flesh eaters. This is the last time I get to recommend that you check out Jambo Shango and Randy Mole's own A to Z, and I'll link in the description field below to their entry for Z, which is for Zombie 3, the in-name only sequel to Zombie 2, which itself was an in-name only sequel to George Romero's Dawn of the Dead, which in Italy was called Zombie. For the purposes of continuity and my own sanity, I'm going to refer to this film as Zombie Flesh Eaters from now on. If that makes you a little bit hinky in other territories, anytime I say Zombie Flesh Eaters, just imagine in your head that you hear Zombie 2. So for now, let's talk about the Lucio Fulci classic Zombie 2. The setup of Zombie Flesh Eaters is, to its credit, nice and simple. It's actually one of the strengths of the film. A seemingly abandoned boat is found floating in New York Harbor, very reminiscent of the Demeter arriving at Whitby in Dracula, the ship that carries Dracula to the New World. This ship is bringing the zombie plague to the New World. A journalist, Peter West, teams up with Anne Bowles, daughter of the owner of the boat, who's missing, and they return to the Caribbean island where he was working with a doctor to try and find out what happened to him. Most modern zombie films descend in one way or another from Romero's original seminal trilogy. One of the things I think that makes Zombie Flesh Eaters one of the very apex zombie films of all time is what it chooses to leave out from Romero's telling of the zombie myth. There's no subtext, there's no social commentary, and it also sort of tries to bridge the gap between some of the older zombie movies and Romero's revisionist zombies by going back to some of the roots of the genre, not calling space dust or pesticides as the reason for the Living Dead outbreaks, but alluding to a tropical island and voodoo, but quite cannily never actually spelling out why the dead are coming back to life. And it's not just the percussive drum beats almost sort of hypnotically pulsing away in the background of the film that elevates this mood of dread and doom. The score, the rest of the score by Fabio Frizzi, is 80s Italian synth perfection, dour and melancholy, but insistent and repetitive. It imbues the proceedings with a sense of fatalism. Just as the chords chug on, so do our characters trudge, kicking against fortune to their inevitable end. And whilst Dawn of the Dead is an absolute masterpiece that I adore, it's the film that sparked 100,000 pub conversations about what your zombie plan would be. If you want to boil down the pure essence of what you would like a zombie movie to be, I actually think Zombie Flesh Eaters hits closer to the mark of some sort of platonic ideal of a zombie movie. And there are elements where I would suggest that Fulci's film is superior to George Romero's Dawn of the Dead, which indeed is his masterpiece, not least the zombie effects. There's something timeless and grungily real and unnerving about the zombie makeup in this movie. The zombies look rough, nasty, they look like they're decomposing, liberally covered with real worms and maggots, so that they do seem like they're fresh out of the grave. They're also your wonderful classic slow-moving zombies, and these zombies are slow. These are cadavers that have definitely been through the rigor mortis process. Every movement sort of looks like agony, the sound of creaking leather. Even though they move at a snail's pace, they are eventually everywhere. And this is one of the things that is lost when zombies are capable of cognitive thought or fast movement. In the classic sense, zombies are like Captain Hook's crocodile from Peter Pan, the one that took his hand with his watch on it, his stopwatch. And for now, the ticking alerts Hook to the presence of his nemesis, and he can do something about it. But in his heart of hearts, he knows that eventually his watch will wind down, he won't hear the ticking anymore, and the crocodile will ultimately, eventually come for the rest of him. And these zombies too are relentless like that. You can avoid them for a while, but ultimately you will be overwhelmed, just like death. We can eat healthily, we can exercise, we can do as much as we can to fend off the bony hand of the Reaper from our shoulder, but sooner or later he will close his skeletal fingers around us all. The movie has a stately pace. It might be slow for some, but that, along with the relentless progression of the zombies and the inevitable cycle of the same musical motif over and over again, sort of lulls me into a quasi-hypnotic state. The inevitability of everything adds to this nihilistic sense of, well, it's this kind of existential dread. Everything on this movie is on a downward trajectory, slowly downward, but constantly, relentlessly down to the end. And there's really nothing you can do about it. It's fabulous. And like rats in a cage, we watch our protagonists retain the spark of hope that they can, we can overcome these few, we can get to this place, we can board ourselves in, we can defend, we can escape, we can get back to the mainland, we can do all of this, knowing that ultimately no, the countless hordes of the dead and the infection or whatever it is will spread and surround them and overwhelm ultimately the entire world. It's not a happy movie, but my God, it's so beautifully down. Unlike Romero's films, there is no undercurrent, there's no subtext. This film is not a statement on consumerism or racism. It's about blood, guts, gore, and the inevitability of death, and Fulci absolutely revels in it. The violence in Zombie Flesh Eaters is what got it classified by the BBFC as a video nasty and essentially banned. Whenever a zombie bites, it takes a chunky mouthful of flesh out of someone. And sure, sometimes it can seem a little rubbery and a little fake, but the gusto is to be commended, because then the camera always zooms in on the wound as it gouts sprays of arterial blood. There's really no coming back from one bite from these zombies. Then there's the splinter to the eye scene, fully restored now, thankfully, cut by the BBFC. Basically, zombies tear people apart whilst people try to take chunks off zombies to survive. It's brilliant. On top of that, you've got Spanish conquistador zombies who've been interred on the island, I guess after rolling right over it in a wave of colonization. But beyond that, you have the ultimate awesomeness, the unparalleled genius and insanity, given that they actually filmed it, of a zombie versus a shark underwater. No CGI. There's no CGI at the time, and the budget doesn't exist even if CGI did exist. So what they do is they get a shark wrangler, make him up as a zombie, and have him fight a tiger shark. It's unbelievably brilliant. It's a zombie versus a shark. It's a zombie versus a shark. Who does that? Whilst George Romero rightfully gets all the plaudits that are coming his way for rejuvenating, reimagining the zombie film, resetting it for generations to come. Lucio Fulci's Zombie Flesh Eaters is absolutely at the apex of the greatest zombie movies ever made. I would actually put it side by side with Dawn of the Dead, Night of the Living Dead and Day of the Dead as absolutely the best of these kind of resurrected flesh-eating zombie movies you can possibly get. Setting aside films like I Walked with a Zombie and Serpent and the Rainbow that deal brilliantly in their own way with a more traditional Haitian voodoo type of zombie. Zombie Flesh Eaters is absolutely one of the greats. Zombie Flesh Eaters grossed higher in domestic Italian box office than Zombie, Dawn of the Dead did, leading to future sequels. So, whilst this A to Z of horror might be over, like the inevitable onward shuffling of the zombie itself, we're going to remain in Italy, and we're going to remain for a little while with some more Italian zombie movies before we ultimately shuffle off and start looking at the works of David Cronenberg in chronological order. But we've got some crazy films to deal with before we get to that. Not least, we'll do the other Zombie Flesh Eater movies. Next up, we'll look at Zombie 3, aka Zombie Flesh Eaters 2, then Zombie Flesh Eaters 3, and then we've got a couple more. So I hope you like shambling, rambling, because after this work of absolute brilliance, it does go a bit batshit. I hope you can join me.